For those of you who are new here, I'm Rivi, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Strivers Network. What is the Strivers Network? We are an internationally recognized youth-led social venture working to empower Sri Lanka's underserved high achievers to attain upward social mobility through a world-leading post-secondary education. We do this by conducting island-wide outreach, providing zero-cost high-touch mentorship, catalyzing community leadership, and mobilizing youth-led advocacy. And you're tuning in to Striver Chats. Striver Chats is an initiative by TSN to highlight the human beings that make up our community and to highlight the success stories that we have been able to cultivate through building TSN over the past close to 4 years now. And I've been really excited to have this chat. Please welcome me in joining Janul de Silva. We were actually in the same batch back in school, and he's a world-class debater, world-class Scrabble player. You get to know more in the chat, but welcome, Janul.
Hi, Ruby. How's it going?
Hi. So let's start with a basic intro about like what you're up to right now, how Princeton is. Yeah.
Yeah, so right now I'm a junior at Princeton, so that means I'm in my third year. I'm in the spring semester, so almost going into senior year, which is kind of crazy. Like, I feel like I came to the US like yesterday, and I've been here for like 3 years. I'm almost on my way out of uni, which is, yeah, that's whack. In terms of how life's going, I'm an econ major. I'm doing minors in statistics and machine learning and gender studies. Yes, both minors are in like a good place right now. I'm missing like one class from each. But for the gender studies minor, like the class I need to take is like a intro, like weed out class. So I'm like a bit like I do like want to take it still. But yeah, in terms of like career stuff, I'm like in like a reasonably lucky position right now. I have my junior year internship, so I've kind of soloed out into consulting. Um, and I'll be in Boston this summer, which is nice. And um, like a lot of the worry I think about being international and not going abroad is that you need to get a job to get you sponsorship, and that's something that like really starts eating at you sophomore year, junior year, and then once you've got that, like it's a bit better. So that's that. In terms of like things I do on campus, like I think there's like a lot of scope at like the universities in the US do things you like to try new things. At Princeton, I was a part of Princeton South Asian Theater, which I did for fun. I did some theater in high school. I did a bit of debate. I think I've taken the foot off that like a bit this semester. Like I decided to take some harder classes, like go a bit deeper into like subjects that I thought was like interesting because I did a lot of debate in high school. I was like, oh, like maybe I don't want to spend all of university doing that as well. Um, Yeah, other than that, like on Prince, I'm just having like a good time. Like I'm also a residential college advisor, so I take care of like first year students, and then that job pays, and it's gives me like a nice room, which is nice. Um, it's also like a great experience, like just mentoring kids as they come in, and like I was the first year, I was confused, and then it's nice to sort of like live in the same space, be their point of contact, and that's something I really appreciate. So it's like a here and there of like what's going on right now. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that lot to touch on. But let's backtrack a bit. Let's talk about how school was for you. What kind of interests you had? Obviously, I might know most of this, but for the sake of for the viewers, why don't you give us a bit of an idea of like what your schooling experience?
Yeah. So for like all 13 years of high school, I went to Royal. So public school, never really thought about like applying abroad that much. Not too much support, at least back when I was in school, just because it isn't really an option that a lot of people think about. Might have changed now, and I know Strivers has done like a bit to build up like those grassroots of like having that knowledge like more accessible. Um, so hopefully like that's better now. But obviously in school, like had a lot of great experiences. So in school, I played Scrabble competitively and did that like pretty competitively. I did debate and got like a lot of support through school, did that. I did like Prefecture, Interact, and like a bunch of like little things, all which like coalesced into like kind of the story that I told admissions that I like speaking, I like words, and sort of what I tried to run with. But yeah, I was in the art stream in at Royal, and I took like local A-levels, and I think that was also one thing I struggled a bit with coming here because I took arts, and then that meant I hadn't taken that much math, and I wanted to be an econ major here, and then like suddenly there's this big like wall of like a lot of the courses that I want, things that are like interesting to learn come with like having to know like some calculus, or like then having to know like multi and like more the deeper you want to get. So that's one thing I wanted to observe. But yeah, I really enjoyed my high school experience and I'm like quite grateful for it.
Um, that's interesting. So does the econ major at Princeton require multivariable calculus?
So there's like a harder version of like multivariable called like Math 201, which is like I think somewhere around like Calc 2, Calc 3.
Uh-huh.
There's an easier version of like called Math 175, which is like mathematics for econ, which teaches like some
Uh-huh.
optimization, some linear algebra, which is what I took.
Yeah.
Um, but it does require you to know like at least some multi to like yeah, like know like Lagrangians and things like that. And like obviously like the higher level econ courses like require more from you and have like proof based stuff. Um, but yeah, I think I just never had enough of a math background to do like except like one proof based class, and that was like very like lightly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to compare like majors between universities because at Yale, econ is like very like much more like chill. Like like you're required to like, if I'm not wrong, you're required to take like any calculus class, and then and it's like it's called a math requirement. You take one calculus class, be it multi, be it calc one, and then you're done. Which I always
Oh.
thought was weird, but yeah. What
Yeah,
else?
because honestly, I mean, right now I'm like, I feel like you should at least know like some math if you're an econ major, like being an
Yeah,
econ major and then taking like history of like financial mathematics or like history of development. Like, sure, but like, is that really
yeah.
like yeah.
Yeah, no,
So,
and there are like, I mean, the different schools of thought on like econ, but like I am of the opinion that like, especially in Sri Lanka, like we tend to like miss out on the history of economics.
hmm.
Yeah, but anyway, all right. So you did your A levels in 2022, and then the world's your oyster. What are you doing after A levels? What are you? Oh wait, no, you applied while you were doing your A levels, right?
Yeah, like the timeline is a bit like screwed up
Whack.
because of
Yeah.
like COVID and like there were the
Yeah.
delays because of like not being able to like finance the exams.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember like applying with like predicted grades, which was like kind of difficult to do at school, even like just to say like, oh, I've been scoring like this on the term test. This is probably what I get in my A levels, and like somehow my A level results are like quite good. Um, and yeah, like honestly, like the turnaround for me deciding to apply was like pretty short. Like I think most people will decide to apply like quite early in the like high school experience, or maybe in like grade 12, grade 11, or like maybe while doing O levels. I decided to apply somewhere in like maybe like July or August when the deadlines are in like December. And I guess this segue brings in like Strivers Network. So like one of the big things that pushed me to apply was like Rivi and Abid, who were also in school and were like foundational, like founding members of like Strivers, like kind of had chats with me and said like, hey, like you've done these things in school, you've done them competitively, like there are reasons to believe like why your application might like have a good shot. And both of them had got offers by this point. So Abid got an offer to Princeton, Rivi had his offer at Yale. Um, and I was like, at this point, like I was quite heavily like just considering like going to like law faculty in Sri Lanka. And like when I got my A-level results, I could quite comfortably like my Z score was high enough to do law faculty. But I was just like, and at this point, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Like, still, I don't really like right now. I'm just like in the pursuit of like what makes me the most money in like, honestly, like early retirement is what I'm thinking about right now. But um, yeah, and then I was just like, okay, screw it, like let's apply. And then within like a
Right.
quite short turnaround, I like with support from Strivers, with support from like a lot of online research and stuff, like talking to people, banged out my essays. I took my SAT like in like the last possible slot because I just didn't have other open dates. Like I learned about applying and then I was like, oh shit, like you need to take the SAT in like the next sitting. Yeah, that's about how like the timeline of that went.
Interesting. And um oh yeah, so just to clarify here, if I remember correctly, you, like you said, like wanted to go to Colombo Law Fac and had apparently had an interest in studying law. So for viewers, law isn't a subject that is offered at the undergraduate level in American
Yeah.
universities. Um, and so for you, like, how did you reconcile that? What kind of like forces were at play, and what ended up? How did you end up like going the consulting route?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the way that reconcile for me is like honestly it's like a trade-off. Like if you're coming to the US and you aren't like reasonably wealthy, at least like have enough of like love for it, I guess that you're willing to go into debt because I know that like law school is comparatively more difficult to like secure financial aid for. Like I know people who've got like offers now at like Harvard Law and like at like Yale Law and Chicago Law, and they're like talking about having to like take on it, which is not something to like necessarily be afraid of because assuming you do it correctly, you can make like a bunch of money like post law school as soon as you start like doing that. But for me, it was just like I didn't want to go into like that kind of debt. So when I came here, I was like, oh, like let's just see what I want. And I think consulting, like as a skill, is a lot of like similar. Like I guess it has like a problem solving element that I like. It involves talking. It involves like it's like a people focused business, which is something I think is like a space I'd like to operate in. And that was fine for me. Um, but yeah, it was like a more challenging thing to do like at the start, but then now I'm like quite happy I made that pivot. Because I think also like a lot of like interest in law sort of like is fueled by like media where you see like suits or something and it looks really cool. And I think like the real law world might not be as shiny as all that. But yeah, definitely yeah, it was like a choice I made, but like I'm happy with it and I don't like yeah, even like in sophomore year though, I was thinking like, oh, like I could still pivot towards law with an econ degree and like do Harvard Law. Like right now, I'm like also thinking maybe like Harvard Business School at some point or like something like that. But again, it's not completely off the cards, and I think it's always an option you can have in your back pocket. In the US, like as long as you have your GPA like reasonably good enough, which is a concern though, because I know like if you do something more sciencey that like pulls GPAs down, or you're at a school which has more grade deflation, law school might become not an option a bit quicker. Yeah.
Cool. So let's backtrack again just a bit. And let's talk about like how just for the viewers, like
Yeah.
talk me through how like the Drivers Network kind of like filled in some gaps for you or any
Mhm.
offered any assistance.
Yeah. I think the biggest issue I had was like a knowledge gap of like just not knowing what was like, I guess, quote unquote, like achievable, like, or like I could get in here. Like Harvard just sort of like Harvard or Princeton or Yale or like any other school sort of seems like a bit of a pipe dream. And I think also another thing was that I came from like a public school, and even though Royal is like a great school within Sri Lanka and like it's very recognized, I think it doesn't have like the same kind of like administrative connections that I would assume like some international schools have, but you have like admissions officers having like personal relationships. or like just that your file is being read as opposed to like being tossed away. But like Strivers Network sort of came in and said like, look, if you've like done your work, you get a good SAT, you've shown passion and made yourself like spiky in some area that like makes them want to like read your file and makes them want to consider you, that you will be considered. And like that was like a bit of a shift. There was also like support in like things like essays. I think this was like part like Shanya from like Strivers like sort of like read through my essays. And I think obviously like also having been on the other side and like help kids also, it's because I then like did like some mentorship in the years after to like kids in like subsequent Strivers batches. Like the support you can give like reading essays isn't like perfect, but I think it's like having that support of knowing someone is reading your stuff, someone to catch the mistakes that you don't. It's also someone to like keep you accountable. Like, oh, like you should be watching these videos, you should be rewriting, you should have this draft by this time. And I think that's like quite useful support. And the third thing was like just like advice and support on like the SAT. I know the Strivers Network did like some workshops about like SAT English and things like that that I know people found helpful. Sort of telling you when the timeline is and telling you, oh, you should probably take this instead of going test optional. And then once you've got a score, you can sort of decide whether you want to reveal it or not. And that's like probably strictly better than like not revealing and not having a score. Because I think if you get above like a 1530-ish, it generally probably works in your favor to have a score rather than not. Um, yeah, and also I think the other helpful thing was like having someone to like talk to about the experiences and hear about how it's good. Like I think if you like spoke to me now, I would say that like I'm very glad I came here just because like I feel like your perspective just expands. Like it's not like your life is going to be any worse if you're like back home or you go to university. But I think like it's like you're in a pond and you don't see the pond until you're outside the pond. And there's probably like bigger ponds out here. Like I'm still within the scope of being in university, thinking past my next problem set, thinking past my next midterm, my next final. And probably when I go into a job, it'll like zoom out even more. But I think there was a big zoom out that happened for me, like from being at home where I was like comfortable, or like I don't know. I was talking to someone about this and I was like, back home, it felt like I was playing like a game that's like kind of like rigged to win. Like in a sense that like no matter what I did, that I went to like I went to like a good school, I had a good education, I done the right things, like had in like I wasn't like I didn't have everything handed to me, but I had enough that like I could live like a reasonable life and it wouldn't be challenging. But like when I'm here, suddenly like everything flips and you're coming to a place where you're starting with like almost nothing. It doesn't matter what you have back home. Like things are very, very competitive. And to me, that's like like at least it's a more interesting way, like for me to think about like life right now. Like I think I'm more challenged and I'm having more fun. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's not to say that the game isn't rigged over here, but like it definitely does count a lot, especially like given the specific like time that we are in right now, I become ever more cognizant of the fact that like I feel like I'm in the center of the, or at least kind of like more my proximity to the center of action is better. And like
Mhm.
yeah, it just um yeah, you put it really well. But let's talk about Princeton. So for the viewers, Princeton is actually the number one university in America as if you're checking the rankings. And so let's talk about. So you mentioned that you are doing a minor in gender studies. What kind of got you into that, and what about it excites you?
Honestly, it was that like I came into university as like a bit of like a politics-ish kid. Like I did debate in high school. I was like, oh, like international development, international relations, that kind of thing. And then I came here and I was like, honestly, like a lot of the classes were like either like some things that I already knew or like weren't particularly exciting. Like I didn't feel like too much was being added. So I was like, oh, like let's try something different. And I mean, like gender is not something that you like talk about a lot or like is like less discussed back home or like less academically studied at least. And I thought it was like quite fun to do here. I think a side story that I tell people for fun is that like I just like the bit of being able to say, oh no, my feminist literature. Um, like every time like I like drop my like books or something. But then I just sort of like stuck with it. And like in terms of like the classes I took for my GSS minor, it wasn't like most of them were like less about like sexuality and also about like different kinds of like masculinities that exist across like different times, like anthropologic perspectives about that, then perspectives about like Islamic feminism and things like that. And then like obviously um like these classes were classes I took in addition to my econ classes because I recognize that it is like a privilege to be able to like study that as your primary focus of study. And that isn't like the privilege I had. I needed to focus on having like quantitative classes that I could show my employers. But I definitely think that like while those classes are also like, I guess in a sense easier, it like increased my perspective and made me like think about things that like you haven't before. Like one really interesting thing that stuck with me from a class was like the way they discussed like how like scientific textbooks discuss like fertilization and the language you use to like describe like how the sperm and like the egg like interact like and how it gives like a lot of agency to like one but not the other, how like there's like scientific like and how like very subconsciously like the vocabulary used to describe certain things can also be gendered in a sense, or can also have like things that you like all of it is just like fascinating stuff. And I think you wouldn't think about it otherwise, or just something I like because like reading the news like tells you like political theory, or like I can understand finance by reading like the Financial Times, but I wouldn't think about this if I didn't like explicitly address it in like an academic setting. Which, yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine like analogous to how like colleges like to see you mentioned Spike, and I want to talk about that a little bit as well, but colleges generally do like to see a diversity or like and like diversity in interests. I remember when I checked my so for the viewers, like you can opt in to like check your admissions file and see all the comments that admissions officers made about you. So for my one, I think they really like kind of emphasized on like the mix of it all, and like they called it eclectic. And I think that kind of applies to like, do you think that applies to like careers as and professional life as well? Just like, does it help? Do you think it might help?
Honestly, I don't know, and I don't think I have enough of like a sample size to say. I know for some fields they definitely don't care. Like if you're going into like quant or something, they just care. And for like viewers who might not know, because I didn't know this back home, like quant is like quantitative trading, and they care about like the mathiest like people who can like do like Olympiad level maths, and then they pay them insane amounts of money. I think they just care about you being able to do like tests and things like that. But I do think in things like consulting, maybe less in like IB, but like in some spaces I think definitely cares about like what that adds to your personality. And like I guess it also like affects like the kind of experiences you can talk about. Like if you've only studied the same things in university, you're just like boring as hell, and like your behaviorals because you just don't know enough about the world, which is why I would recommend like even if you know your focus is like economics or biology or like chemistry, that you still take other classes that like as cliche as it sounds, like make you like interdisciplinary and like you know more things. Yeah. I mean, I've had people tell me like, oh, like it's good that you're doing like a GSS minor. It'll make you like look humanized to like recruiters. But like I think it's less that because some of them care. Some of them will be just like I literally like don't care. But I do think it makes you more interesting, which I think like tangentially makes you like a better candidate. Like wholeheartedly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, like, I guess you could call it like social, but like I wouldn't say that like a quant. I guess I know what they mean when they say that, but like a quant isn't any less human than like a consult anyone. But yeah.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk
No,
about
no, quants are human, but like I don't know. Yeah.
that probably is at the core of their being. There must be something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But let's talk about like fun memories. Since we were on the topic of academics, why don't you talk about like your favorite class? that you've taken so far?
Oh, honestly, like, one of my favorite classes I've taken, and I've like only taken like one like it. I took like sculpture. I think freshman fall, and no, not freshman fall. Sorry, like sophomore fall, I think. And that was just like a really cool class because like it was very therapeutic. Like I learned how to use like woodshop tools. I learned how to like make like concrete and like it was like very like big projects. So like you worked on a project for like 4 to 5 weeks, which like is different to like most other classes where you had like quicker turnarounds, like a weekly problem set, or like you worked on something for like maybe like 2, 3 weeks. And then this just like going to the shop was really nice. And then like, I was like quite proud of what I made. And that was interesting. Um, like a weird class I liked was I liked econometrics, which is a class that I think people tend to not like as much, which is like the applied statistics for economics. And to me, it just felt like the most applicable out of like any of the econ classes I'd taken at that time. Like everything else just seemed like, oh, like for like macro, you make some like long-winded model and you're like, oh yeah, this works. Or like for micro, you like simplify things, but
But
then
it
like
doesn't, like, most of the time.
yeah, exactly. And then econometrics is like everything just seemed very structured. Like, oh, here's what you'd like to do. Here's how you like approximate it. And then this semester, I'm taking like one of my most challenging classes this semester is I'm taking like a econometric applications course that like digs a bit deeper into like those fundamentals and makes you like replicate studies and like gives you data sets and it's like, oh, what would you do to this? How would you answer this question? What are like how would this estimator be biased? What would you do? Like what more data would you like in an ideal world? And like that's something that I think is like fascinating, even if it's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, not to go on a tangent here, but like
Yeah.
you talked about sculpting. I think that's like talk about hands-on learning, right? Like I think it's so under not appreciated, but I guess underrated. But so
Mm,
I'm taking like an education studies course this semester, and for that I'm having to observe like a high school every week. And
mm.
so the high school I'm observing happens to be like on the shoreline, and it's like they call themselves an aquacultural school. And basically, half of the curriculum is the students like in the boat shop learning how to like create a half hull or repairing boats or even riding boats. In fact, like
Yeah.
students like get their certification or whatever for boating, and like they do like charters for Yale and all the other universities around. And I just think that adds so much to their learning, aside from like the usual academics. And I feel like that's so applicable to Sri Lanka as well. And I thought it was just a really cool idea. But yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like I don't know, like them just like saying like, oh, this is how you take like a square block of wood, you stick it on like a lathe, and then that starts spinning, and then you grab like a
Yeah.
thing, and then you can make it like a circular, like a cylinder, and like things like that, which is
Yeah.
like so cool to do. And like it's something I'm hoping to take senior year. I like really want to take like sculpture too. So I took like sculpture one and then like sculpture two. And like some of the professors there are like really fantastic. Like the professor I had there was like a professor who was at Yale before, like
Mhm.
Martha Friedman, but it was like really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, did they let you take the final product with you? Like, did they let you do that?
They did, but I accidentally like left it behind because it was like pretty chunky. It was like a metal frame with like wood.
uh,
Um, but like I just had nowhere to keep it for summer. And for the
yeah.
viewers, like that is like one big issue of like going abroad. Like summer storage
Mm,
is like a big demon to think about. Like if
yeah.
you're lucky, and I know people who have this, I didn't actually like tangentially I did to an extent, but like unless you have like a family friend or a friend who lives in the same state, um, every summer you'll probably have to move out unless you're staying on campus for research or something, and you have that option. And so if you have all your stuff in your room, that needs to go somewhere, and typically you won't have like you have more stuff than you can like feasibly take home, even if you're going home, or you might not even be going home, in which case like that's not an option. So
Yeah.
um, sometimes people think about like renting like a trailer. Some leave it with a friend. Like obviously this isn't difficult, but it is something that like
It
you
is.
think about like each year. Yeah, and
Oh,
like
for
right now
sure.
I'm quite lucky. Like my job gives me like a allowance each year to like buy summer storage from like the school facilities, and that like
Mhm.
makes things like a lot easier. But
Yeah.
obviously that's a massive privilege that like yeah, doesn't always like it didn't have like first year. Yeah.
Yeah, these are like the struggles you don't really hear about until you actually go through it. Like, for example, like for me, it's like filing taxes. Like someone has to
Oh God.
like someone has to like take my hand and sign it for me just because I can't like it's just, yeah, I can't do it myself. It's just annoying. But
No,
um
Ruby talks about taxes now. I still haven't
yeah.
filed my taxes. My girlfriend
Let's
like
talk
did it.
about like South Asian theater. I think Abid was also
Yeah,
a part of the same
yeah,
group that you were in, right?
yeah.
Can you talk? Can we talk? I'm curious about like the theater scene at Princeton because I compared it with like between MIT and Harvard, for example, and
Okay.
it's like, so different. Like it's so differently structured.
Yeah. I would say like the theater scene at Princeton is like I don't think it's very hardcore. Like I think like the improv scene might even be a bit better than the theater scene. Like some of the student run productions for like senior theses and all are like quite good. And I think those are like higher. And then we have like this studio called Makata that like sometimes like brings in shows, and like they brought in like the Woman in Black, which I thought was like a really clever show. And this show called Here There Are Blueberries that won some award um recently. But like in terms of like the student thing, I think it's like a bit more chill than I think some theater I've seen at home. Like at home, it's very much like, oh, like no noise from the wings. If you're leaving something on stage, like even if you're like backstage, it needs to be kept like with like pin drop silence. I don't know if this was the experience for like all theater back home or like all theater everywhere, but like it's what I experienced. And here it's a bit more chill, like and stuff. Princeton South Asian theater is like even more chill than that. It's like a slapstick, like silly like comedy group that like kind of makes fun of South Asian like stories, like runs like common tropes of like weddings, things like thinking about college or like and in poking fun at that tries to like highlight tropes. Like you'll make fun of like colorism within like South Asian communities or like how brown people might perceive like whiteness and like how they interact with that. And by making those jokes, they're kind of like pointing to the fact that certain things exist. And I honestly like it like less for like the theater and more for just the community. I think it's nice to like have met like a space on campus that is like quite like enthusiastically brown, if like that's the way I'd put it. In the sense where like a lot of the time, like I do think like anti-brown like racism does exist like quite significantly within the US. Like not to the point where like you'll face like violence or like you'll face discrimination, but just like casual jokes against you or
Implicit
like
bias.
things. Huh?
Implicit
Sorry.
bias.
Yeah, implicit bias or like that you can just like some jokes you can make towards like brown people are like kind of like normalized. And I think that means like a lot of people will like subdue certain parts of themselves. Like you'll be more cognizant of the way you speak, of like I guess like the way you smell, the way you sound, like the things you do. And I think it's nice to be in a space where you don't need to think about that and also see other people who are being themselves. And that kind of like emboldens you to like I don't know, like live more authentically on campus, which I think is nice. But it's also like a lot of this is internal, but again, it exists, it doesn't. It's like bias is hard to like deal with.
Yeah. If you're comfortable with it, I want to like go deeper, like sort of into that in terms of
Yeah.
like um let's see in general like what like how your social life I guess like has been defined by like your identity, especially
Mm.
like being brown or being Sri Lankan or being South Asian, like how has it like mixed in with life? Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I think the first thing, and this is more like me, I think my transition of like getting used to school was pretty violent. Like I came from like a public school, it was segregated, like only guys. And I think that's a transition coming here. Like it was a bit less bad for me because I'd interacted in spaces like debate, like Scrabble, where I had friends who were girls, and like that made me like more socialized than like say some people who would be in like more of like a like setting where it was primarily like one gender, which is the case for like a lot of schools back home. I think that's one shift. I think also it was like a lot more freedom here that you don't have back home, like to like just try out new things, grow out your hair, like try jewelry, try new aesthetics. And I think there was a lot of like a long figuring out phase for me where I figured out like what I like to do and who I like to be. And this is also different to like when you're no longer at home, like a lot of like being back home is defined by like your parents or what your community wants or what's like acceptable. And then when you come to university, suddenly you have like adulting with like a lot of support. Like you don't have to worry about rent, you don't have to worry about food. People cook for you in like dining halls. You don't really have to worry about money, and you can find a job, and then you can like buy yourself like sweet treats when you want. Like, and all of that is something that I really appreciate. Like I work like 20 hours a week, like from like freshman, spring, sophomore, fall, which made sure that like I didn't have to like ask home for like more money, or like I could like buy things. And this wasn't them telling me, oh, you need to earn your own, but it was just that I felt more comfortable like being able to spend like money that I earned, because it's not like I don't feel like I'm like like I don't know. But on the idea of like brownness, I think definitely like some people will have bias towards you. Like this could be like casual things, like someone saying like, "Oh, like I didn't know like they spoke English," or like, "Do they speak English where you're from?" Some people might like mistake you for being Indian, and that can be like, I don't know, for some reason as a Sri Lankan, like it's always like kind of weird when someone's like, "Oh, is that India?" Uh, I feel like we're slightly racist towards like Indians, or we're like, "Oh, like screw it," like we're anything but Indian. Like like call us like Pakistani or Bangladeshi, but like not Indian. Um, I also think that it can also be something that affects people within like dating markets, which I think is like a big store of like personal value. Like you have people who like, oh, I date anyone but not like a brown man or a brown girl. Like if you're a brown woman, like you might struggle with like feeling, so like needing to put in more effort than if like you're white, or like being perceived as like I guess more manly or something is like something that I know like friends of mine have like faced. And I think a lot of it is sort of just like recognizing like what you are and like what parts of it are biased, and like distancing yourself from people who like will make you feel inferior. And I think one thing that's like helped me a lot, and like right now I'm like like super confident, like is like just like doing things like applying for that internship, applying for that position, and then assuming you put in the work, more often than not you will get something. And it's like the bias isn't so bad that like if you apply for a job you'll be rejected because like you're brown. Like that won't happen. You might get rejected because you're international and they don't hire you, but that's like another can of worms. Um, and I think a lot of it is also like just being authentic in yourself and doing things that make you more confident. Like I gym pretty regularly. I like try to eat healthy, like make sure like you drink water, your skin's clean, yeah, like moisturize, and like you can do things that like just make you feel better. And yeah, I think the big thing is just like community, and like then finding yourself and like not letting yourself like be pushed down. And not many people will try to push you down, but when it does happen, you need to like not let it sort of like take you. I don't know. Sorry, I rambled a bit there.
No,
Uh,
like I love rambles. That's kind of what this is for. Um, I think about the whole like us being racist towards Indians. I think it could be not the fact, but like I just think that like being Indian has such connotations in
mhm.
the West, and like other
Yeah.
Asians like to kind of pack all that into the identity of being Indians and like detach
Yeah, I think it's like a
themselves from
scapegoat that
that.
you can like kill. Like
Yeah.
you make the figure of the Indian like the sacrificial like lamb,
Yeah.
and you're like,
Yes.
that's like the bad part of being like South Asian. But I also think
Yeah.
like this is something I've spoke about to like friends, is that like hating on like that figure of the Indian is like so normalized. Like you can't say anything towards like being Hispanic or being black or being white. Like people would be like, oh, that's racist. But you can make a joke about how like someone like smells of curry, or like how someone
Yeah.
is like weird, or how like a country like shits on the road, or like people are dirty. And like these jokes are like acceptable to an extent.
Mm.
Like you wouldn't get like canceled for saying it. And that's something that I've been like a bit vocal about, like among friend groups and stuff, that like, oh, like that's not that great. Um, And yeah, but I do think it is a real issue that like if you are coming to the US, and again, I live in New Jersey, which like for context is like a pretty blue state, so people tend to be more liberal. Again, your experience could be like this could again be a much bigger challenge if you come from like a state like I don't know, like Texas, I guess, like or like Iowa or somewhere that's like a bit more red, where you have like people who are less exposed to this kind of thing because in places like New Jersey, there's like towns like Edison that are predominantly brown. It's a bit more international because like the school districts are good, so like educated like international kids will like come to these like come to like their school, so you grow up in high school with that kind of thing. But again, a lot of it is just like not letting it like take you down, and you'll like in any university you'll be able to find like the community that supports you. And like at the end of the day, like if you're doing well in school, if you have the job or like the grad school that you want, then like it doesn't matter. Like once you get to like the workplace, or once you get to like wherever you're intending to go, like you won't be held back by like someone's like spouse.
Yeah, I think you touch on two really important things. Firstly, like for those watching who are interested in studying abroad, like just do as much research as you can. There's no like limit as to like how much research you can like put into it. Like, I mean, forget the whole world. Even within America, like Janul was saying, like there's so much variance, and like you can go to a rural school, you can be in a city, you can be in the South where, you know, people are more conservative. So that's really important. And a bit of a plug, we are gonna be putting out a 12-part YouTube video series called Undergrad Unraveled. And if you're interested in applying to the Scholars Pipeline this year, it is a requirement that you watch all 12 episodes and you get an understanding. This is just for us to make sure that everyone who is applying has a base level understanding of what it's like, of how to like of studying abroad. And so we on kind of common ground. But yeah, that's about that.
One thing I'd like to quickly plug here is also like if you ever experience like racism or something in like a university, I think the worst thing you can do is like be ashamed. Because I think the more apologetic you are for like being brown or speaking a certain way, of looking a certain way, the more it becomes like something that people can like take you down for. And I think like one of the things I hate the worst is like self-hating brown people, which is like a thing you get in like some schools where people are like, well, like it'll be like a brown man or like a black man who's the quickest to like hack at people in their community or be like, oh yeah, that's them and I'm not like them, or like haha. And that's like an easy pivot that can happen to some people. And I think like staying away from that is like good. And like I don't know, this is like super random, but like there's that one creator that's like getting really popular from like Penn State, and it's like that brown man who's like I think it's like Shamak in the US or something. It's like this brown man who's like very unapologetically brown, and he's getting like a big following, and people are seeming to like buy into his thing. And I think it's just like being like authentic and like not really like yeah. I just thought like a really interesting thing.
Yeah, it's like go off, King. Yeah, I kind of experienced that in terms of like I kind of like leaned one way like in my first semester, and I kind of like leaned hard the other way after that. Like
Mhm.
in my first semester, I was like very involved in the South Asian society, and then at some point, and I really enjoyed it, but at some point, I kind of like had to like do a bit of soul searching as to whether it's where because it was like whether it was me embracing my own skin and culture, or whether it's me retreating to my own skin and culture. So kind of
Mhm.
like it's a complicated topic, but like
Yeah,
you kind of have to like, I don't know, you find your own balance. Something
yeah,
I really
100%.
struggled with, and I especially have a really hard time saying no to things. Like you
Mhm.
really have to learn how to say no to things because you're gonna be pulled in all directions. And like think about it, right? Like the best kind the best talent, apparently, like the best talent in all like these different fields, like it's all really interesting and it's happening all the time. So you really need to, and I guess in a way the way the college application is structured, the holistic admission system, I think in a way should prepare you for that in terms of like being sure of who you
Mm.
are, but also being open to exploring. It's just all nuanced and all just a bunch of different things. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk just the last leg of this. Um, I have like something I call the infamous question, like to part with, which is, do you plan on returning to Sri Lanka? What's next for you? Like, let's say 5 years from now, what are your plans?
Realistically, I probably wouldn't return except for like to see my family and things like that over like the next 5 years. I think I would plan to work in here for as long as possible. Not as long as possible, like through it like really depends exactly what I want to do. So like right now I'm in consulting and like assuming I don't mess up, I might be able to get like a return offer. So I might plan to like work there for a bit. Then obviously on the cards, there's a lot of like like the thing about consulting is I think it's kind of like a waiting move you can make. Like obviously there's a career out where like stick to consulting and I like try to get as far as I can, like become like a manager or a partner or something and see where that goes and be there over a long period of time. There's a world in which maybe I try to pivot towards private equity um like like next year or like a bit later. There's a world in which I go to like try to go to like business school because I think that's typically a path people take when they like choose on consulting. Um, like I don't know, might try like industry or something after like gaining like 4 or 5 years of experience or something. It like really depends. I think right now, just because I've made so much, like I put in so much effort here that I think it makes more sense to like spend some time reaping that benefit that I've like completed education here and I've like tried to like claw my way into like the American like corporate rat race at like a decent position. Um and yeah, I think just like I would like earn more here and I think that would make more of a like um yeah, I think one thing I struggle with is like a lot of people talk about having like purpose and like having like this greater meaning to like everything you do. Honestly, like still haven't found that. I don't think I've like had one for like the longest period of like it's like I can focus on like things I want to achieve and then like dedicate like everything I have towards achieving them. Um, but like for this, it's just like I don't know. Like I do like want to support my community, whether it's like helping people out through Strivers or like helping people out like with like the Debaters Council back home that I've like tried to do like some coaching for and things like that. But beyond that, like I don't think there's anything like really grand I want to achieve. But sometimes I'm like, I'm wondering like maybe should I have that? But yeah, not right now at least.
Yeah, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with it. Certainly, Princeton didn't think so. And like, yeah, I need to catch myself sometimes. Like, I think I like tend to get caught up in the whole like, what is my purpose sort of thing.
Mhm.
And I think that depends on like personality as well.
That's
Um,
fair.
but yeah, I think again, I think it's about balance and just like finding your place in it. But yeah, thanks so much, Janul. Like I've been meaning to like like catch up on how things have been, and this was the best way to do it. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Do you have any like parting thoughts for, future scholars, prospective strivers?
Yeah, I guess I'll like segment this by like age. Like if you're someone who like isn't yet applying and you have like a couple of years, like 2 to 3, or, like 4 years, and you're watching this, I think my advice would be to like figure out what you like and go all in on it. Like it doesn't matter that you're like particularly good at it or that you're like broken at it. I think you just need to like show consistent effort and like if you care about it and like you put effort, you will get good at it, like at least to an extent. But like if you like chess, like grind it. Do things that like make that better for you. If you like maths, like maybe try to push yourself to like compete at like an Olympiad. If you like speeches, like try to like just keep pushing yourself to the next level. And like obviously like reward yourself when you do that. Like don't think like, oh, I need to go from like zero to like Toastmasters like world champion or something. Like that's not gonna happen. But like give yourself like room for like micro improvements and like stick with it over time. The other thing is like don't force yourself to do like one activity like just because you want like admissions. Like I've heard people say like, oh, this won't help me in the admissions office, so my mom like doesn't want me to do it anymore. Like that I don't think that makes sense. Like I think like you can have like the most like random like weird combination of things, and if like your passion for that shines through, you'll probably get selected more than like someone who was mediocre at like debate and they decided to do that because their mom was like, oh, these officers love debate. um I think that's that. If like you're someone who is like closer to applying and maybe it's too late to pick up an extracurricular, or like go all in on something that you love, I would say like what I'd recommend is like trying to figure out like what story has been like pushing you forward thus far. Like just think about like what's been driving you, why have you done the things you've done, and like if you can make sense of like a narrative for that and like figure out where you've come from and what's been making you tick, try to like put that onto paper and like see how that goes if you apply. And like just learn more about these colleges, learn about the vibe they have, like reach out to people. I think a lot of these universities now have like pretty like at least one Sri Lankan or someone who has like Sri Lankan heritage. And I think more often than not, if you reach out to them on like LinkedIn or you reach out to them by email, they'll probably like say something back, be willing to speak to you for like 10 minutes. I know like if someone like emailed me and like unless I was like really busy, and if you're proactive, I probably would be willing to speak to you for like 5 to 10 minutes at least. Um, it's that. And then, yeah, honestly, I think the big thing is just like go all in on things you love. And yeah, like probably heard that one before, but
Yeah, but I think it needs to be said. So thank you. Yeah, and that's it, folks. Thank you, Janul. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you
yeah,
to
thanks,
everyone
Ravi.
watching. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no,
Uh,
thanks. Yeah.
yeah. Have a good one. See you. Okay. Okay, we're done. Cool.
Okay. Oh, that was tiring.
Wait, where are you going?